Hi, my name's Ken Oliver. I'm going to show you how to make a really beautiful birthday card with color burst and mineral burst. It's awesome. For this card, I'm going to use my 5x7 water media greeting cards. I'm also going to use 6x6 water media paper that I cut to 4x6. So just cut off 2 inches on that side to give you a 4x6 piece. Also going to use color burst, embossing powder, and alpha stamps to create my happy birthday sentiment. To get started, I'm going to create an all-over pattern on the background by stamping and embossing with my stamps and embossing powder. And you don't have to be exact about this. We're really just going to create an all-over pattern on the back that we're going to color later. These flowers are really beautiful. And my water media paper and cards have 2 sides. There's a smooth side and a textured side. And you'll notice I just turned my cardstock over so that I'm stamping on the smooth side. And I'll place a couple of these flowers around. And it's okay if you run the design off of the cardstock a little bit. It just makes it look kind of nice. Now I have those flowers stamped. And I want to sprinkle embossing powder onto that embossing ink that I just put down. Make sure we get all the stamped image covered with embossing powder. That will give us a really nice design whenever we add color burst to this. Oh, that's beautiful. And now I'm going to use my heat tool to emboss the designs. So now we have our flowers beautifully embossed onto this water media paper. The next thing I'm going to do is add a happy birthday sentiment. And to do that, I'm going to use my alpha stamps. This is a clickable alphabet stamp set. It has 36 pieces, so it has extra vowels and consonants for the ones that you'll use the most often. And I've just clicked those together to make the sentiment happy birthday. This is really easy to use. You just take the letters, they come apart from this little block, and then you just click them together to make the sentiment or write the words, whatever you want it to be. And they'll always be perfectly spaced, perfectly in line, and you can click them together if you have more than one word so that they can be spaced like that. I could space it like this. There's a lot of ways I could do this. But they always click together, and then that way your letters are perfectly spaced and they're always going to be nice and straight and in line. So I'm going to do the same thing again with the watermark resist ink. Then I'm going to use some embossing powder. And this will be very beautiful whenever we add color burst to it, because the design that we've embossed will resist the watercolor, resist the color burst, and show up as a white design. It'll be really pretty. And then I'll use the heat tool to melt that embossing powder. So the next thing we're going to do is use color burst to color this background. And I've got a few laid out here in a tray that I'll use. I want to use this beautiful marigold for the background. That's from the Fresh Florals assortment. I'm going to use wisteria for some of the coloring in the flowers here. That's also from the Fresh Florals assortment. I'm going to use some turquoise here. That's from the Caribbean Brights assortment. I'm going to use gamboge for the center of the flowers. That is from the Rich Moroccan Shades assortment. And this is going to go really easy. It's fun to do. So with the clean paintbrush and clean water, I'm going to paint a background of water all around the flowers and all around my birthday sentiment. What I want to do here is just get a nice layer of water on the front of my cardstock, because we're going to come back in and sprinkle some color burst on here and let that color burst work its colorful magic. And you don't have to worry too much about staying in the lines, because the embossing powder that's already been embossed on there will create a resist and keep the color in place where you want it. It's kind of cool. So now I've got a nice tray of water on my card front. I'm just going to come back with a little marigold color burst and tap a bit of that onto my card front. And you could use as little or as much as you like. If you want to have a really intense color, use more. If you like it to be more muted or faded, use less color burst. And then with my wet brush, I'm just going to go back and kind of blend that in. It's going to give us a really beautiful watercolored card front. You can always grab a little more water if you want to. And now you can kind of see how that happy birthday reveals itself because the color burst and the water don't stick to it. And you'll notice for this, I'm using a flat brush. A flat brush will just let me cover a wide area of surface. And you want to use a wide brush whenever you're not really too concerned about having a lot of fine detail. When I come back and color this with color bursts in the flowers, where I've overlapped a little bit will actually give me a little bit of shading and make it look really nice, which is kind of a hallmark of watercolors, seeing those overlapping colors. Now, doesn't that look good? And I'm going to give this a quick dry with the heat tool. Here's another little tip when working with watercolor paper or water media paper. You'll notice that that paper buckles a little bit. That's absolutely normal. Whenever you get it nice and dry, it will straighten out. And to get it nice and dry, I'm going to even turn it over and dry some on the backside because water saturates or seeps into the paper fiber. And so to give it a dry on the backside will just help us dry it evenly. And you can see there that it starts to straighten out. Now, here's a cool technique that you're going to love. I'm going to go back and add in some dots of water to give this like a sparkly effect, almost like we're looking at sunshine, at dappled sunshine, or like some little bubbles. So to do that, I'm going to take my Spritz bottle and I'm going to adjust that Spritz bottle so that I have just a few drops coming out. And I'm going to add a few drops onto that surface. And I'm going to let that sit for a minute. And what that's going to do, it's going to remove some of the pigment and give us those like little bubbles or little bitty spots of light. And we'll need to let that sit for about 1 to 2 minutes. What's happening there is this water and the pigment are interacting, and the pigment is actually being lifted off of the paper by the water. So now we're ready to take that water off and reveal those really beautiful little spots of light. And I'm just going to roll my paper towel over the front of my card. And like that, look how you see those little bitty spots of light. That's another thing that is kind of indicative about watercolor, is that you can actually remove pigment after you put it down by adding more water and letting it sit for a minute. So I'm going to give this a little dry too. So when that's all nice and dry, look how those little dots of light almost give you more texture and more visual interest to your composition. Now comes the fun part. We're going to color with color burst. We're going to color each of these flowers in with color burst, and it's a lot easier than you think. To do that, I'm going to use a paint palette, and I'm just going to tap out a little bit of color burst into each one of those wells. So I'm tapping out some wisteria. And it doesn't take a lot because color burst powder is incredibly concentrated. It's really, really intense. I'll tap out some gamboge. Gamboge is a beautiful golden yellow color. Historically, I think gamboge was made with resin that was ground and turned into paint. And I'm going to use some turquoise. And I think I also want to grab some peony. That's also from the Fresh Florals assortment. And for this, I'm going to use a round watercolor brush. A round watercolor brush will let you hold a nice fine tip whenever you get it wet. And I always paint with a big brush. This is a number 12. You could use a round 8 brush or a smaller brush if you like. I just happen to like painting with a big brush. And I'll get some water on there. And then I'm just going to grab some gamboge. And first I'm going to paint the centers of my flowers with gamboge, just by taking a wet brush with color burst on it and painting those centers. I'll rinse my brush out, and I'm going to grab some turquoise. And I'll just grab a little bit of powder on my wet brush and I'll come right in there and just color with water and color burst. I'm going to rinse my brush out so I have clean water on it. And you notice I just put a little bit of color burst around the edge. And I'm going to go back with a clean brush that's still wet. And I'll just color with the color burst and the water that's there. See how easy that is? And you get a beautiful effect. The next color on this flower is Wisteria. It's a deep purple color. So I'm going to grab a little bit of Wisteria on my brush. And I'll just go back and kind of do the same thing again, paint around the edge with a little bit of Wisteria and color burst. And you notice I'm not like taking a lot of time to stay in the lines and be real exacting about what I'm doing. That's because with watercolor, you don't always have to stay in the lines. And then I'm going to clean my brush and with a wet brush, just blend that color and basically just color with water. And look how beautiful that is. We've created a beautiful watercolor card front with color burst and stamps. So I'm going to give that a dry. The next thing we're going to do to really make this happy birthday card zing is we're going to paint a border of new mineral burst around the outside of our card front. So to do that, I'm going to move this away. I'm going to grab my card front. This is a 5x7 folded water media card front. And I'm going to open this out just so I'm working on a flat surface. And then I've got mineral burst. Mineral burst is a paint medium that is really, really shiny. It's almost like metallic watercolor. And always make sure that you shake that up really, really well before you use it to disperse all of those minerals and all of that glittery goodness throughout your medium. So I'm going to use my flat brush for this because I want to paint just a border around the outside of my card front. So I'm going to dip into my mineral burst and I'm just going to paint a border around the outside of my card. And I'm going to leave about a 1/4 inch space between the edge of my card and my mineral burst. Now, when we put our card front on this, it's going to give the impression that the entire background is painted. But since the card front is actually going to cover up most of the front of this card, I'm only going to paint a frame of mineral burst around the outside just to give the impression that the entire background is painted. See, when we put the card front on, it completely hides the center. I don't know if you can see this yet, but it has a really beautiful shine to it. Now to finish this card, all we're going to do is take the card front, put some foam squares on the back of it, and apply that right to the front and we'll be done. And I'm using a 1/4 inch foam squares. Put a few of those on. I like to use a lot so that my card front will be nice and tight and it won't collapse in the middle. And I'll just do this kind of by sight. Wow, doesn't that look good? It's a beautiful watercolor happy birthday card using color burst and mineral burst.